Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Sean Lang. I've spent the last several years building and operating a digital agency that's grown past 50 people, and this has definitely shaped how I think about the decisions that really start to matter once things get complex. Today is another solo episode, and we're going to be talking about something. It's always something important. I'm not going to talk about something that's not important, but this is something that I've seen firsthand a lot with coaching clients. This is something that's been cropping up a lot. And the synopsis for this entire episode is good processes, or processes, depending on how you like to pronounce it. I'm never sure anymore. Good processes will not solve for the wrong people. Good processes will not solve for the wrong people. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let's dig in. A lot of agency owners believe a lie that if I just document it, if I just create the SOPs, if I just create the processes, the agency will run itself. I wish this was the case. This is not the case. Yes, you need these things. You need SOPs, you need processes, you need documentation. But you need to understand that SOPs solve clarity problems. Having a defined process solves a clarity problem. It does not solve for a lack of competence, a lack of care, or a lack of character. An SOP will tell somebody what good looks like, but it can't make them actually want to do that, to want to uphold that standard. Now, 3 reasons why systems alone will not work. You've got a skill gap. So they don't have the technical ability yet, or your SOP becomes a crutch, not a guide, in that they can't work without it. Or you end up with lots of questions after training, but lots of repeated mistakes and slow output. That's the skill gap. B is the will gap, in that they can do it, but they just don't. The signal here would be, they're making lots of excuses. There's selective compliance. Sometimes they follow the SOP, sometimes they don't. Some SOPs they follow and some SOPs they just completely ignore. Sometimes they just forget and there's sort of inconsistent effort. That's the will gap. And then C is the culture fit gap. So misalignments on standards, on ownership, on how we show up as an agency, on what we believe, and what quality looks like. The signal is that they kind of treat quality like it's a subjective taste rather than a standard set by you. So I'm not saying this to be harsh, but we just want to make sure that we're not confusing documentation with leadership. And if you are a new agency owner, or maybe even a timid, mild, maybe an introverted agency owner, you're going to lean in heavily on the documentation and sort of hope that covers the leadership for you. And unfortunately, it does not. Now, one uncomfortable truth here is that your systems might actually just be exposing your poor hiring. And the reason is, when you add structure, this actually removes ambiguity. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but ambiguity is where weak performers like to hide, right? So if things are still failing after you've put in the systems, this means either your standards aren't clear, which is rare if you've actually built really, really good SOPs, or the team isn't capable or aligned enough to meet them. And that is going to be more common. So ask yourself this question. If you had to bet your own money from your personal bank account on this person hitting the standard in the next 30 days with your help, with coaching, would you bet your money? Would you? I think in most cases when we make a hire, the answer to that question is probably not. Now, a really important piece to all of this that can help make the problem better managed is having a strong culture, starting with core values. Now, core values aren't just it's not just a culture exercise. They're actually decision tools. Core values exist to answer who gets rewarded for what, or what kind of behavior gets rewarded. What kind of behavior is, I don't want to say punished, but what kind of behavior is highly discouraged, and who ends up getting removed based on this types of behavior, right? So an example here is, if one of your core values is extreme ownership, that's going to mean that missed deadlines will automatically trigger ownership and prevention, not just explanations and finger pointing. How many times have you had an issue with an employee? Maybe they were a well-meaning employee, but they missed a deadline and you brought it up with them, and rather than just owning it, they came up with a million different excuses as to Why was the client's fault? Why was another team member's fault? Why was the economy's fault? Why was the platform's fault? That person would not be practicing extreme ownership if that was one of your core values. And that would be kind of an important piece right there. We just have to really, really understand that accountability at its core is a behavior. Now, I teach agency owners how to create systematized accountability, which is a structure in which to help you, the agency owner, bake accountability in as a purely operational play. But most founders will build this accountability system, but then they will actually avoid the accountability element themselves. The system is meant to surface these moments, these opportunities to actually hold people accountable, and then see if they'll rise to that occasion, and then see if they'll hold you accountable, and see if they'll hold their team members accountable. So a system like this, working correctly with a founder that is actually keeping people accountable through it, means they're setting the standard. So they've actually defined what done looks like with examples. Then they're inspecting the work. There's a review cadence that's predictable. Now, this isn't to say we're going through and we're looking at every single piece of deliverable and output and going through it. No, we are tracking the metrics and looking for leading and lagging indicators of whether or not we are doing what we need to be doing. And then we enforce the consequence. And again, we don't like consequences, right? Digital agencies, we like to have the foosball table and the open bar and, all this fluffy stuff. That's great. But that's not great if we're not enforcing the system. We're not enforcing the standard. We're not enforcing the consequence. So this means we're going to be coaching if necessary. We're going to be putting people on a performance plan if necessary. We're going to change somebody's role if they are not a fit for that role, or maybe we're going to exit them. Because the difficult thing here is that if there's no consequence, you don't actually have any standards. And this is how a lot of agency owners and agencies in general are operating right now. So your next move isn't just to create another SOP. Realistically, if you don't have SOPs built out, you do need SOPs, but they are not going to solve all of your problems. So your next move is actually going to be creating, one of three decisions. Do I need to train the person? Do I need to replace the person? Do I need to restructure the person's role or restructure the team in general? You need to decide what it's going to be for one or two roles that are currently breaking in the agency. Because at the end of the day, systems don't run your business. They make it easier for you to run the business. But at the end of the day, people run the business, starting with you. Agencies are all about people. And you cannot just set up the system, build the machine, create the structure, and then expect everything to work while ignoring the people element. That is probably one of the worst things you could do. And that's also one of the most common things that agency owners do. And this mistake generally will take agencies down within the first 2 to 3 years. And then the agencies that have lasted longer have kind of figured this out at this point. They figured, I've got everything right except for people. I guess the only other thing to do now is really, really get better at managing people, get better at finding the right people, get better at building culture and core values. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, guys.